Grandma, Grandpa, I know I promised to come every week. I did. But I can't afford to live here anymore. Great-great-granddad, I'm sorry, but a foreigner says I don't have the right to stay here.
What's up, guys? Spenny. Ever feel like the economy is rigged against you? Why could that possibly be? Well, because the percentage of lawmakers in Congress over the age of 70 has skyrocketed parabolically, and we live in a gerontocracy, rule of the old. And those old people are going to act in their best interests, and that would be regulating and voting themselves lavish riches while pulling the ladder up behind them, ensuring that there is actually no future for you, and that's available in the data. You know why young people are frustrated about the cost of living, the inability to buy homes, start a family, the kind of things that actually provide purpose in life? Well, here's why. It is totally radicalizing. Just one generation ago, 55% of 30-year-olds were both married and owned a home. Today, it is less than 10%. Married and own a home by 30. What that means is that we are robbing an entire generation of the American dream. And this is infuriating to that generation. They're going to grow up in rent serfdom, servitude to financial institutions, owning zero equity, owning nothing. They'll be happy, but they won't actually be happy because they've missed the peak window of fertility. The average home buyer is 40 years old at this point. How do you even start a family, a legacy, generational wealth at that age? You don't, in fact. You'll be replaced. You can see here the percentage number of workers, foreign born, that are taking white collar jobs in the US by year. It's at nearly 20 million. It used to be at less than 1 back when the greatest generation was coming home from World War II. But now look at what our leaders have done. They've robbed us of the American dreams, and now they're making us pay for it. You can see here, these are the number of loans that go to lock Americans out of homes in favor of criminal aliens and H-1B visa holders. Oh yes, you're exactly right. The federal government paid for this for your displacement. And now guys like Ben Shapiro want you to be thankful for it. That's right. Ben Shapiro going viral again for all the wrong reasons, summing up why his brand of conservative is dying fast and why the populist left will steamroll any Republican parroting these views. If you're a young person and you can't afford to live here, then maybe you should move, he says to native New Yorkers. Let's listen to the comments here.
Person and you can't afford to live here, then maybe you should not live here. I mean, that is a real thing. Okay? I know that we've now grown up in a society that says that you deserve to live where you grew up, but the reality is that the history of America is almost literally the opposite of that. The history of America is you go to a place where there is opportunity. And if the opportunities are limited here and they're not changing, then you really should try to think about other places where you have better opportunities.
What an insane thing to say. What an utterly disqualifying thing to say. Being a citizen of a nation that your grandfather, great-grandfather traveled here, voyaged here to build, fight for, die for, in most cases, entitles you to grow up and to live in the same place where your grandparents' graves are. It entitles you to have a home, a community, a heritage, a value system that you share with your neighbors. That comes from permanence, that comes from tilling the soil in the same town that you grew up in. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What Ben Shapiro says about adventuring out and going places, yes, this is a big country. Some people choose to do that, some people don't. But to say that you are not entitled to that, yes, you are, in fact. This is fundamentally wrong and a horrible way to say this, to make this point. Sure, do you have agency in this massive nation to go out and make your own adventure? Certainly. But should the prescription be that we've destroyed your hometown? We've made it so expensive so impossible for you to live there. We've replaced you with tens of millions, if you're looking at places like LA, New York, Chicago, of foreigners. And so now you can no longer live in your hometown. You don't even recognize your hometown anymore. That's what's actually being said here. And then to say if you don't like that, then you can just move. It's despicable, in fact. It's a despicable opinion, and it is the opinion that actually leads to open borders. And this is the opinion of globalists. Just call it what you will. This has happened to Europe. This is something that is obviously happening in the Western world. That is saying, listen, like you have Australia's big. You should just let as many foreign nationals into Australia as possible. There's other places to live. You can live in the outback, right? You just go live somewhere else. They're finding out the hard way in Europe, actually, that this isn't the case, in fact. And that whole cities, counties, entire portions of countries become no-go zones when you do this. That you actually lose Paris. When all of the French people move out, it's no longer Paris. Do you understand that when all of the English people move out of London and it's just people practicing Sharia law from Pakistan, that it's no longer London? It becomes Pakistan. We've just seen this happen in Minnesota, where Minnesota is like Somalia now. It's no longer Minnesota. They don't even speak English. So what is that? It's treating America like an economic zone. It's reducing the American experience to you are simply an economic unit. You don't have a culture. You don't have a shared heritage. Your grandparents died in vain for this nation. They weren't preserving anything. They weren't preserving Christendom or Western civilization. They weren't preserving our founding documents that talk about our creator, our currency and government buildings that talk about God. They weren't preserving what we know to be American heritage. That none of that matters. That's not real. You have no right to this land. You have no right to live where you actually were born and raised, and where your family has died, in many cases, and for many Americans, since the Mayflower. Pre-founding of America. There are many families like that. I know families like that. What a atomized, disintegrationist, nihilist view of not just this country, but any country. Try saying that to people in China. Try it. Go on over there. Try and say that to people in Egypt. Try it. Try saying that. Go to any African nation. Go to Chad and say that to the Chadawans. I don't know, people from Chad are called. Try it. See how it works out. It's an awful take, and it is getting rightly roasted in my timeline. I have no time for Shapiro as long as he keeps up this crap. Living near your kin fills your life with goods, few of which can be qualified economically. Shapiro's only response to Mondami is, if you grew up in New York and you have to leave because policy I support that makes elites wealthier, well, that's just America. There's a reason why everyone under the age of 50 on the left and the right believes in sacrificing everything for GDP growth. The economy was made for man, Tucker, not man for the economy, Shapiro. It's like a fundamental breakdown now that's happening in my timeline. That is a remarkable response to this. Conservatism lost for decades because it was headed by people like Ben, who are ultimately just losers. Americans have no obligation to give up their birthright. Americans shouldn't have to give up their town or city that they lived in and move to the middle of nowhere because the left has disenfranchised them. Or to just anywhere else, right? You shouldn't be forced to move from New York to Chicago because New York got destroyed and then Chicago gets destroyed. And it's like, this is a horrible viewpoint. Again, it's totally nihilistic. It's totally reducing all people down to just economic units. and saying that no one has any heritage anywhere. The history of America has settlers staying on the same plot of land for generations. That's exactly right. Sometimes centuries to defend what their ancestors gave them. Ben doesn't understand that. I mean, what a wild idea. You know, because Ben's like, the idea of America is that like you can move around to places, certainly. And I wouldn't try and, I mean, the alternative to this is like, we'll lock you all in 15-minute cities. I'm not for that. If you want to go live in Wyoming, go, right? If you're from Delaware and you want to go live in Wyoming, go. I have nothing against that. But for those families in Wyoming whose great-grandparents, you know, right after the Civil War, traveled by ox cart for years to get out to Wyoming just to lay a claim to a piece of land that was inhabited by wolves and bears and tribes that would kill you. And they fought all of that and so that their family could have an inheritance. They fought and died for that inheritance. Then you have every right to say you're not allowed to come here and ruin this thing that my ancestors fought to give me. This is my birthright. It is my heritage. I am a citizen of this nation, and that means I have a claim to it. We are all stakeholders here in America. Citizenship means something. I don't think Shapiro and Levin understand how much they help people like Nick Fuentes every single time they open their mouths. The best thing they should do is shut up. In case you still don't get it, Zorhan Mandami is the result of conservatives listening to Ben Shapiro and fleeing their homes and communities, becoming nomadic economic migrants who exist only to serve corporate interests in the stock market, while other foreigners invade and conquer your most powerful, influential cities. It's true. You lost your home and everything meaningful, but at least they have the economy lines went up. Ben Shapiro's solution to young people's problems off. Is Ben Shapiro getting smaller? I think this is photoshopped. You deserve to live where you grew up is a problematic worldview in Shapiro's estimation. That's pretty wild. If we want Democrats to have a supermajority, then this is the message for the GOP to adopt. Tell people that they need to move. Don't form family bonds. Don't fight back. Worship the banks and big corporations. My goodness. I'd rather die on my shield than tell my kids that I can't afford to build a life and family and church and community that love and support them. Shapiro's views our kids as fungible economic units that can be arbitrarily moved around on the board for maximum economic effect. That's right. What an insult to all parents to say that. What an insult. This reminds me of when Shapiro said nobody should ever retire. Just keep working till you die, as if he'd never encountered anybody who works in the trades or spent 5 seconds thinking about what it would do to a roofer or an electrician to retire like that. Ben is tone deaf, says Steven Crowder. I suggest leaving New York City because it is a socialist s-hole, but conceding once great American cities to secular socialist shitholism is not part of our history. Young Americans have a right to be mad. Never give up your citizenship. Tucker Carlson had a debate with Ben Shapiro. I would love nothing more than to hear the two of them debate today. Desperately. We need to rehave this debate. But Tucker Carlson predicted Zorhan Mandami in that debate with Ben Shapiro, and then went on to explain what capitalistic nationalism actually looks like in a debate about driverless trucks. That's fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. And even though it's 7 years old, this debate, it perfectly crystallizes where we are today, where we are now. Again, you can't live with this.
And once you start to receive Social Security and you are eligible for Medicare is 65. Joe Biden has technically been eligible for Social Security and Medicare for 16 years, and he wants to continue in office until he is 86, which is 19 years past when he would be eligible for retirement. No one in the United States should be retiring at 65 years old. Frankly, I think retirement itself is a stupid idea unless you have some sort of health problem. Everybody that I know who is elderly, who has retired, is dead within 5 years. And if you talk to people who are elderly and they lose their purpose in life by losing their job and they stop working, things go to hell in a handbasket real quick. But
nobody should retire ever? Yeah, my grandparents retired and they spent time with me. The only reason I have any relationship with them at all, the only reason I have any heritage anywhere, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, is this city that this happened in, is because my grandparents weren't working until the day they died. My most treasured and precious memories are with them. This is this is an insane serfdom, rent slave, vagabond way of life. It is an insane, preposterous, and I think indefensible way to look at the economy, at least from my perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. The classic Tucker Carlson versus Ben Shapiro debate holds up and has aged like a fine wine. Here we go.
If the goal is preserving the family as the core building block of any successful society, and it's got to be that goal, because it has all kinds of effects that we want, and it's just inherently good. I don't need to explain it, but I could. But the point is, if that's the goal, what are you doing about it? If you wake up one morning and you find yourself in a society where 23-year-olds with 4-year college degrees and like initiative who aren't smoking weed every day, if they can't make enough to buy a car, much less a home, much less get married, much less have children, then why should you be surprised when half of them say they prefer socialism?
would you, Tucker Carlson, be in favor of restrictions on the ability of trucking companies to use this sort of technology specifically to, sort of artificially maintain the number of jobs that are available in the trucking industry?
Are you joking? In a second. In a second. In other words, if I were president, when I say to DOT, to Department of Transportation, we're not letting driverless trucks on the road, period. Why? Really simple. Driving for a living is the single most common job for high school educated men in this country, in all 50 states. By the way, that's the same group whose wages have gone down by 11% over the past 30 years. The social cost of eliminating their jobs in a 10-year span, 5-year span, 30-year span is so high that it's not sustainable. So the greater good is protecting your citizens from, look, capitalism is the best economic system I can think of, I think that anyone's ever thought of. But that doesn't mean that it's a religion and everything about it is good.
No, but
there's no Nicene Creed of capitalism that I have to buy into. What I care about is living in a country where, decent people can live happy lives, actually. And so, no, I would say immediately, no, are you joking? And I maybe would make up some pretext for public consumption, like, oh, they're dangerous. The technology's not quite finessed. No. But the truth would be, I don't want to put 10 million men out of work because you're going to have 10 million dead families, and the cascading effect from that will wreck your country.